Greetings, Earthlings. This is Kathy Beal of Empowerment Unlimited.net. Steve is greeting the world. I am delighted and honored to have returning renowned astrologer Steve Judd. Thank you so much. You've delighted my show many times. You've honored us many times, and I'm so glad you were able to make the time to talk with us again.
Hi, Kathy. Yeah, great to be back. Thank you for your continued support.
Well, what do you want to talk about, Steve? What's on your mind these days?
How long you got? Well, I got into a bit of trouble over the weekend when someone said to me, how do we solve the world's problems? And I said, shoot all the Aquarians.
Help! No! I'm a good one.
In trouble straight away. Look, there's no point in dilly-dallying about it, to use an English saying. The internet is full at the moment, more so than I've ever seen it, of wannabe astrologers talking about how this Mercury retrograde is the one that changes everything, or this full moon is going to bring the end of civilization, or how 3i Atlas is the harbinger of technological doom that's going to signify the end of humanity. And it's all just clickbait. It's just clickbait. That's all it is. And these people need to be ashamed of themselves. They're certainly not astrologers. Because if they were, they'd be taking it seriously, and they're doing astrology an injustice. And if I'm any judge of astrology's capacity as a live, valid, valent force for change in the world, not an inert subject, astrology, people don't find astrology, astrology finds people. And if people are abusing astrology's gifts, then she's going to take them away from them. So that's my rant bit over.
Well, I call them the TikTok astrologers, and they drive me up the wall. Up the wall.
Pathetic. Truly pathetic. I do want to get a couple of plugs in, but I'll do that whenever it's convenient for things I'm doing.
You've got a lot going on.
One in particular. Yeah, I've got some big gigs next year. I'm doing a big one with Penny Thornton, the Amadown conference, and Shifts Happen is going to happen again. But on solstice this year, on Saturday the 20th, I'm doing a free live stream on the 6th of December. That's to the world. But on the 20th, I'm doing a paid live stream on the sacred geometry of the solar system, because the stuff that's coming to light just in the last few months on the never 100%, but on the 99.999% accuracy of some of the sacred geometry that's actually out there in our solar system, the perfection of it, it's never been really truly acknowledged as being as simple and yet incredibly complex as it is. And it's groundbreaking stuff. So I'm going to be doing stuff like that on the 20th of December. But that's kind of a hobby thing for me, because that's about exploring and stretching the boundaries of astrology. When you come down to the down-to-earth, grounded nuts and bolts, how the astrology that you and I have been practicing for decades and decades actually still affects people at the daily and individual as well as collective level, then any astrologer worth their salt, any astrologer who can look at that and read the patterns in there, knows that the next 6 months is going to affect the next 100 years in a way that's never, ever, ever happened before. It is a truly monumental time. We're on the cusp of an absolutely pivotal point in evolution, that our apprenticeship as a species is at an end. And the decisions we make collectively in the next 6 months are going to determine whether we head into dystopia or utopia, and whether we as a species will survive and thrive, or whether we'll be extinct in a couple of hundred years. I can be that black and white about it. So yeah, fascinating times to be alive.
No argument.
What? What's wrong with you?
I happen to agree. But I have a 29-degree Jupiter, so I'm enormously optimistic.
As you're being no doubt aware, there's a lot of big lineups coming up in the next 6 to 8 months, 9 months.
Mhm.
The last of which, or the last big lineup, is in mid-July, where you've got Pluto at 4 degrees Aquarius, Uranus at 4 degrees Gemini, Neptune at 4 degrees Aries, and Jupiter at 4 degrees Leo.
Mhm.
I have Jupiter at 4 degrees Leo and Chiron at 4 degrees Aquarius. So, yeah, I'm kind of got a vested interest in making this a good thing, I hope. But we've got to get through to July first,
Mhm.
because there's some serious stuff coming up. So can I give you my take on it?
I would love you to do that. I'll just sit and listen, and everyone else can do that as well.
Right. I realize when I'm talking to you, I'm preaching to the converted, but we're talking to the people out there. The moon doesn't only go round the earth. The moon also goes up and down, north and south of its orbital pattern, and it also goes further out and further in. So it's got three cycles, four really. It spins round the earth once every month. It spins on its axis once a month. It moves out and in. And at its closest, it's about 215,000 miles away. And at its furthest, it's nearly 250,000 miles away. So quite a big difference. And then it goes up and down, up as far as 23 degrees, north and south of the solar equator, of the celestial equator. So the moon is always in flux. But what's really unusual is that at this time, the moon is static in its orbit around the Earth. It's not moving out or in, and it's staying at the same speed for 6 months. What this means in terms of manifest phenomena is that over a 6-month period, every full moon and new moon is going to be at the same degree of consecutive signs. So we're now 1 month into a 6-month period where all the new moons are at 28 degrees and all the full moons are at 13 degrees. And yes, there's a solar eclipse coming up with the new moon 17th of February, 28 degrees Aquarius. I noticed there's a few world leaders with a lot of very important planets at 28 degrees.
Mhm.
So I'm expecting some really, really big changes in the world. But it's not just the full and new moons. It just so happens that there's a gradually increasing concentration of planetary energy in isolated signs. It started already with the new moon a few days ago, when we had Mercury conjunct the sun and moon at Uranus. The next new moon, we've got the sun and Venus, I think, is Aries. Then we've got the sun and the moon and Mars in Capricorn. And by the time we're into the new moon in Aquarius, we've 4 planets in Aries, 4 planets in Aries, 3 in Pisces, 3 in Aquarius.
Mhm.
Then we get to the new moon in Pisces, where there's sort of 4 or 5 planets in 3 or 4. And then something like the 18th of April, get the actual date, we have the new moon in Aries with in Aries. And it's not just randomly spaced throughout the sign of Aries. You've got Mercury, Mars, Saturn and Neptune all conjunct within less than 5 degrees at exactly the same time as the sun and moon are conjunct basically on top of Chiron by less than 1 degree. The Mercury, Mars, Saturn, Neptune's at the start of Aries, the sun, moon, Chiron's at the end of Aries, but we've still got 7 planets in Aries. Now, I've gone through all the ephemerides I can find. I've used AI to trace it back. I cannot find a time in the last 10,000 years where there's been 7 planets in Aries. And if there has been a time where there's been 7 planets in Aries, it was before the outer planets were discovered. and we weren't aware of their influence. So this is a once in a species event, not just once in a millennia, much bigger than that. And it seems to me that set against the backdrop of all the outer planets changing sign and the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, it seems to me that as we get into with that solar eclipse in Virgo a couple of months ago and that killer new moon in Scorpio a few days ago, it seems the more we get into that Aquarian new moon, that Aquarian eclipse, somewhere around the 17th, about 3 days before the Saturn-Neptune conjunction or 3 days after, then that is the actual nexus point. And then we've got that 7-planet lineup in Aries, which is to me that's it. That's the choice point. We go one way or the other. And you can be absolutely sure the dinosaurs are going to be doing absolutely everything they can to hang on to the power, as they have done for thousands of years. But the groundswell of public disgust with our leaders, alleged leaders, is going to hopefully counteract that. And then we've got that lineup in July. And that, to me, has tremendous potential. Could be the start of a whole new phase where so many different possibilities exist. You know, we're beginning to see the end of nation states, the end of individual currencies, a more collective way of seeing ourselves as one species rather than different countries and different races. And of course, I'm speaking Aquarian utopian nonsense in many people's eyes, but it all starts with a thought. Mm-hmm. And as astrologers, it's our job to dream in positive futures, to inspire people to hope for a better future. Because at the moment, the dinosaurs are winning. But
well, they appear to be winning. What I think of when, as you're talking, is what my first astrology teachers always said, which is if a chart says something once, it says it 4 or 5 times. And this lineup sounds like the cosmos saying, and we really mean it, underscore, underscore, underscore.
This is it.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a practice. This is not a drill. This is it. And if we get it right, we make a breakthrough. And if we don't get it right, we get a breakdown. I know which way I want it to go, and I'm going to be putting everything I can into it. And someone says to me, but how can we as individuals make these changes? We're all subject to the whims of our leaders. And it's like, come on. I don't know how many readings you do, but I do sort of 10, 15, sometimes 20 readings a week. And I'm changing the world one person at a time. Because those individuals, they'll go out and they'll go, yeah, we don't need to look at the world like that. You could look at it in a more positive way. Because perception is the key to everything. Mm-hmm. And it's just a slow crawl, an undercurrent of more positive ways of seeing the world and smiling at people. And it sounds altruistic nonsense, but it actually works. Now, the older I get, the less I've got to lose. I'll be dead within 10, 15 years. I've done everything I wanted to do in my life. So everything's a bonus now. But the idea of dreaming, I used to be so much more cynical about the hippie ideals because I grew up between the end of the hippies and the start of the punks. Mm-hmm. I identify more with the punk era than I do with the hippies. And I was quite contemptuous of what I saw the peace and love generation. But now as I've matured and grown and been through various life experiences, I realize, and I know a lot of people will switch off at this, but the underpinning vibe behind everything is love. Unconditional, unqualifiable. And if you're not doing things out of love, it's not going to work as well as if you are doing it with love.
And aren't we seeing that being activated all over the world? That's a common response to so much of the atrocities that are going on. I'm seeing people step up and do things to take care of other people in ways they've never gotten off their butts to do before.
Yeah, and they're not making judgments by color of skin or religion. And
Yep. Oh, we're in agreement here. And for people who are out there freaking out, I love the fact I've done research. I've talked to a lot of people who've done research that the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries at that early part of the zodiac is first detectable at basically the dawn of civilization. So you can look at this as rebooting. And when when people come to you and say, "What can I as an individual do?" Well, ask King John what happened when the Magna Carta was foisted on him. That's the recurrences of what has happened when Saturn and Neptune have met in all kinds of signs. Uh, I just look at it like the history is there, so we just have to be really positive and step into it and claim it, which is how I see all that Aries. But that's me.
I totally agree with you. And I've been having a lot of arguments with a lot of how can I describe them? How can I describe them without being too offensive? The London elite, okay, the people who do their astrology in the hallowed halls of London's astrology clubs and associations and circuits, and never once do they step outside them and do readings or talk to people on the street. Whereas I'm doing gigs in cinemas and theatres, and I'm taking it out onto the street where it should be. And they're all going, "Oh my God, Saturn conjunct Neptune. It's the end of history. It's at 0 degrees Aries, 1 degree Aries. It's the end of time as we know it." And I'm going, wait a minute. Yeah, it can be really difficult. It can be really challenging. But have you seen the alternative? What? What's that? And like Neptune dissolving the old structures, the old attitudes and philosophies and boundaries of Saturn, changing the rules, from changing the boundaries from concrete and steel into rubber and elastic, being more flexible and adaptable. And then Saturn bringing structure into the imagination, helping us create something new and changing what was merely a fantasy and a dream into something imaginal, which can be manifested through creative effort. So this is always a positive. You can focus on the negative if you like, and many people choose to do so. But that's just keeping yourself in bondage. Whereas by focusing on the positive, yes, you may be a dewy-eyed dreamer. But I know which one I prefer to be. So I'm not seeing the Saturn. I'm seeing the Saturn Neptune as a breakthrough, not a breakdown.
I agree. Same here.
And I think the big winner out of all of this is astrology. Because in times to come, people are going to look back and go, yeah, that Kathy Beale, that Steve Judd, that the thing. They were talking about 2025 and 2026 long before it happened. Maybe there is something to astrology after all. And I'm beginning to I've come up with this idea that astrology is the lingua franca of the emerging consciousness revolution. It's the universal language.
I love that.
I talk to people in Japan and Korea, in Paraguay, in Taiwan and Vietnam. And I'm not speaking words. I'm just drawing astrological symbols. And they're going, oh, yeah. And they're drawing them back. And we're talking each other in the language of astrology. It's a planet-wide language. And
Esperanto for the new age.
Absolutely, Kathy. What time to be an astrologer?
Now, I've heard you say, have I not, that you're an advocate of teaching astrology in schools, that it would make a vast difference in how humans evolve if kids learned it.
That's evolved in the last year. I've always said, since I started studying astrology, I said in the 70s that I wanted on my epitaph, on my gravestone, that if astrology were taught in schools, within 2 generations, we'd see an end to warfare, racism, misogyny, and violence against people. Now, what's happened in the last few years, I've discovered that astrology is being taught in some schools, particularly Montessori, Steiner schools.
I had
I've
no idea.
realized there are now a number of astrological entrance into universities. I was at the first one with the Masters in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology at Bath Spa University, now at Lampeter. There's the Kepler conference in Washington State, and that's got a big university gravitas. There's now astrology being taught in university colleges in Dubai, admittedly from an Islamic perspective. And one of my close friends, Alex Trenoweth, who is a full-time professional educator. She's been a teacher in mainstream schools for 30 years. She's also been an astrologer in schools for 30 years. And her research on the Jupiter cycles, the 12-year Jupiter cycle, amongst the age group of sort of 5 to 17-year-olds, the main educational age, is groundbreaking. And she explains why some teachers dread taking the sort of the age group of 11 to 13-year-old, because they're the most disruptive. Well, they're going through their Jupiter return. They're really growing, and they're growing faster than their brain can keep up with. And she's really good at explaining this, and it is getting recognition slowly, insidiously, in a way that's under the radar and behind the scenes. Astrology is getting into the schools. When I did my MA, we couldn't go any further. There was no PhDs, and now there are. But it's not a PhD in astrology. Can't do that. It's a PhD in applied cosmology. Go figure.
Uh-huh.
So it's just not happening fast enough.
Yeah. Well, now you're taking it to the streets. You're an advocate. So talk about cinemas. What you've had conferences where you've booked a cinema?
Yes. In the last 2 months, I've rented a big cinema right at the end of a big 5-star hotel at the very end of Carnaby Street in Soho in central London. And I've put on conferences, one evening conferences with myself, Alex Trenoweth, Rick Levine. We've streamed it live to the world. First one, we only had about 35 people. Second one, we had about 75, 80, and we streamed it to 200 or 300 people. And now we're seriously thinking of doing this once every month or so. We've got a number of cinemas now saying we'd love to host you.
Well, excellent.
But the one thing that has changed everything in the last just 2 or 3 years is the capacity for streaming. Now, we've been streaming for years without calling it, because that's what StreamYard and YouTube and Zoom is all about. But that's streaming as individuals. Now we got to the point where we're streaming as individuals, but recording it for later broadcast, such as this. And on my Zoom teaching course, where I'm teaching students each week, I'm teaching up to 150 students at any given time, at the same time on a Zoom class. But when you're actually live streaming to the world from the comfort of your own home, and you can reach as many as you like. I've done live streams from here, where I'm sat here, for as few as 25 and to as many as 250. And the ones I'm going to be doing in December, I really want to break the 500 barrier. And it's not for an ego thing. I want to get astrology out into the world. That's all I want now. Everyone who's ever been dependent on me is okay now. I've achieved everything I've ever wanted to do. So now I've got this thing. I want to get astrology out into the world. It's a legacy thing, I think.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, Jupiter in Cancer would be accentuating that for you, I would imagine.
Yeah. It's standing still right now, exactly on top of my Mars, because I've got Mars in Cancer. But well, I have a Mars conjunct Uranus in Cancer. So, yeah, it's bringing a lot of interesting opportunities. But I'm old enough and astute enough to be able to say no to many of them. You know, the ones that say, we can make you rich. I'm like, bye.
Oh, yeah, that's not why you do this. Honestly, that's not why anybody who's, well, a judgmental thought coming out here. If you're operating from a position of integrity, that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because you want to spread the info.
Integrity, dignity, and authenticity have been vastly underused words. And it's easy to sort of use those words and get on the moral high ground. But conscience is a killer. You know, you set yourself up as someone who's got those words and you've got to live to it. Because if you don't and you fall down, then you fall down in front of everyone. And conscience, what is it? Richard Bach, Illusions.
Mm-hmm.
Your conscience is the measure of the honesty of your selfishness. Listen to it carefully. Great. One of my 3 greatest books of all time, in my eyes. I used to buy Illusions by 10, 15 at a time and just give them away as presents. It's great. You must know it. You must have seen it.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a break now, everyone. Hang in and we'll hear more about what Steve's got going for next year. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking today with Steve Judd. Steve, what are you telling people, or what are you thinking about how we can make use of the lead up time to all of those big aspects coming next year? I'm thinking specifically of what everything that's been churned up by the repeated grand water trines that are taking us through the end of 2025.
I'm not a fan of trines, Kathy. I mean, they're lovely. When you see them in a natal chart, yeah, they're lovely. They bring a harmonic flow. They blend. They help integrate different energies in a really harmonious and synergetic way. 2 and 2 equals 5. But by transit, on their own, I think that trines make you lazy, or they make you complacent. Mañana, it'll still be there tomorrow. Whereas sextiles, they make you work for what you want. They give you the window of opportunity, but you actually got to put the effort in. I prefer sextiles for that. Having said that, the trine that's been ongoing now for a month or so between Jupiter and Saturn, and that because of their various retrograde patterns is going to be sticking around until August, when the last Jupiter-Saturn trine will take place in Aries and Leo. Any contact over a period of time between Jupiter and Saturn's kind of balances out, any positive contact, that is, balances out the need for excess versus the need for paucity. So I suggest this is bringing a global realization that when you see a CEO earning 10,000 times more than the person who cleans their office, about how obscene that really is. Now, I don't begrudge people making very good money. And if a CEO were to earn 20 times, 50 times as much as the person who cleans their office, I'm kind of okay with that. But, you know, once it gets into the hundreds or thousands times, it's obscene. You know, these people are going to die the richest corpses in the graveyard. Money doesn't buy happiness. It's not how much you got that counts. It's what you do with it that counts. Mm-hmm. And I believe that the Jupiter trine Saturn that's going on now is bringing slowly, gradually, steadily an emerging consciousness that there is enough to go around. It's just that the balance is distorted. And I must admit, I am looking forward to Saturn moving into Aries and Jupiter into Leo. It's going to be a lot less about portraying the victims and the martyrs and impinging on people's feelings. And it's going to be much more about, right, what can we actually do
Mhm.
I love it that all of these big planets are moving into the masculine signs. It's going to lead to a much greater degree of being proactive and dynamic. And yes, there may be quite a bit of unrest as a result of this. But to quote Terence McKenna, for 10,000 years, they've fed us stories of disempowerment and control, and it's just a lie. It doesn't matter whether we're talking the banks, the economics, the governments, the religions. The idea of everyone making a jump in consciousness and becoming more self-dependent and self-independent, becoming more sensitive and more conscious without becoming telepathic, where everyone will just instinctively know when someone walks into a room with a gun or a knife. We don't need that level of regulation anymore, that level of control. I'm not trying to make all the dominators of the last 10,000 years the bad guys. It all started with the first priests, were the calendrical people who noticed that, yeah, sure, sun always rose at a certain point on a certain day. So they decided, okay, that's the high point. Let's put a stone in the ground and we'll call it solstice. And that's equal, so that's equinox. But some of them used that calendrical stuff for farming and agriculture. Great. Others went, oh, we can make a cult out of this and we'll be the priests. And that was the start of religion. I'm fond of saying that the original god and goddess were the sun and the moon. You know, the idea of veneration of the planets in the sky and the objects in our sky go back beyond recorded history. And don't even get me started on bloody 3i Atlas. What a con.
I won't talk about it. So people keep asking me, like, no, no. So what I'm hearing, or what I'm extrapolating from some of what you're saying, is Saturn, Neptune conjunct in Aries gives each individual the ability to be their own connection to the divine and not have to go through an intermediary.
Well put. Exactly. I'm not dissing the priests. For thousands of years, we've had to toil in the fields, and we didn't have the time or the energy to think about our spiritual salvation. But now we've got so many pick and mix theologies, dogmas, and religions. And the days of priests acting as intermediaries between us and the divine are over, especially as not many people trust priests anymore, especially parents of young children. I'll stop there on that one.
Right.
We've all got our own relationship with the divine, however we choose to see the divine as being. I don't do God, but I've got a great religion. We've got a great relationship with spirit and the divine. I choose to call it she, simply because I'm more comfortable with the idea of nurturing and benevolence and a spirituality based on those words: compassion, empathy. And to me, that's a feminine thing. That's not so much a gender thing, but it's a feminine thing. On my travels, for the documentary that I've been still doing on the history of Western
Wanted to
astrology.
ask you about that. Oh, yeah, update us on what's going on with your documentary, because you've been talking about the history of astrology, and now.
Well, we did so much in such a short space of time. I was talking to my producer just the other day, and I've been doing my accounts for the last year, and I realised that a year ago we were just setting off on filming everything. And it's like, in the first 6 months, we filmed so much. We shot so much footage. We wrote so many scripts. We were in the studio every week. And we got so much down. And then we crashed and burned. And we needed to stop and step back. We didn't think we were doing it at the time. It's only in retrospect we see this. And we've now done nothing on the documentary for the last 4 months. We've now booked studio time in the first weeks of January, and we're going back to start the next phase.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it's coming back. And I'm trying to persuade everyone connected that we should put out the first episode for free to the world in December or January as a taster. But, you know, technology is moving so fast now. The first episode that we finished 6 months ago is now looking like it's from the 1930s. 6 months ago, we were experimenting with this new thing called AI, and now... Oof. So we've got to update everything because time is moving so fast. But we need to get it out quickly while there's still time to get it out, because I want it out sooner rather than later so that it can still influence people in terms of making the necessary changes to their consciousness and perception while there's still time to do it before it's too late. So, yeah. And I found myself doing something I've never done in my life, getting down on my knees and praying to an effigy of the female divine inside of Vesica in a Austrian cathedral. Tears running down my eyes. And the bastards filmed me as well doing that. They also filmed me crying my eyes out when I'm stood in front of the 30-foot high cedar doors carved in such geometric perfection at the Mosque Cathedral in not Granada, in Cordoba in Spain. When you're confronted with 99.999% perfection of geometric symbolism to that quality of degree, and it's carved so long ago, as a geometer, it just hits me right there. And I burst into tears because, and it can never be perfect because you can't ape the divine. There's always a minute little flaw somewhere.
So as to not insult God. Yes.
Absolutely.
But isn't it astonishing how your being reacts, short circuits your mind, and your entire being reacts when you are in the physical presence of certain things that maybe you've learned about, but they're real and you're in their force field?
I was in the Mosquita, the castle next to the Cordoba Cathedral Mosque in Cordoba, and it's got 4 towers. One of them is the Tower of Light. And you walk in there and there's lots of little arrow-shaped windows all around at the top. And there's a lot of little arrow-shaped windows at the bottom of the floor. And you walk in there and everyone's going, oh, this is just for air and circulation. It's not. It's so you can sense the energy of the planets coming into that narrow, round, focal tower. And then you can expel that energy back down through the holes in the ground into the waiting people below. It's a cauldron of power. And yet the other side of exactly the other side of the square is another tower, which was the headquarters of the Spanish Inquisition for 300 years. Now, in the Cordoba Mosque, they have a little replica of the Jesuit priests, because once the King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella retook southern Spain from the Muslims around 1300, they superimposed Christian effigies on top of all the mosques. They couldn't knock the mosques down. They were too big.
Mm-hmm.
So you go into the big mosque in Cordoba and you'll see effigies of it's not the Dominicans, I think it is the Dominican friars, all walking in line with very black hoods like that, Ku Klux Klan hoods, but they're black. And they're the people who did the Spanish Inquisition. And you kind of look at it and you think, yeah, and you just get shivers when you look at it. And the joy looking at the Islamic geometry, and the shivers when you look at the rigid, misogynist Christian torturers. The paradox is unnerving. And there are beautiful Christians and there are bad Muslims, of course. But there's good everywhere and there's bad everywhere. It's just lifting the consensus, elevating the consensus slowly, gradually, steadily. So I think that the Ku Klux Klan got their idea of their costumes from the Inquisition. I'm guessing here. But it seemed pretty weird that the priests of the Inquisition had exactly the same garb as the Ku Klux Klan, except that the Ku Klux Klan had it in white and the Inquisition were all in black. Fascinating.
I agree. Mm-hmm. All right, so you will be reviving your work on your documentary, and that's one thing you've got going for 2026. Tell people about the concept of shift happens.
A year ago, I was getting really irritated with the hallowed halls of astrology. I'm a punk. I belong to the Groucho Marx school of astrology. I wouldn't belong to any group that would have me as a member. You know, and I've got a few friends who are like that. One of them's Rick Levine. And I was saying, you know, I think I'm going to put on a conference. Will you come? He went, yeah, I'll come. Make it so I don't lose any money and I'll come. I said, okay. And we tossed a few names around. And we were aware of what's coming up this year. And I was like, yeah, SHIT happens. He says, yeah, but you can't call it that. That's too extreme. I went, nah. I just tossed a few ideas around in my head. And then out of my mouth, by accident, I didn't plan on saying, come the word shifts happen. And that stuck. And last year it was me, Rick, Penny Thornton, Alex Trenoff, and Nick Campion. And this year it's the same crew, except that instead of Nick Campion, we've got Darby Costello. And we haven't announced it formally yet, but it's going to be happening. We'll be announcing it in December. Tickets will be available at the end of the year. And there'll be it's a 136 bedroom hotel just to the northwest of London, 4 days. And it should be something completely different. We'll be running a day trip from there to Avebury Stone Circle, Silbury Hill, West Kent, Barrow. You know, that's it's the oldest and biggest stone circle in the world. Well, the biggest stone circle in the world. There's a whole village inside the circle.
I've had some magical experiences there.
Oh, it's my temple.
I spent the summer solstice there one year. Yep.
But before that, I'm doing a 3-day symposium with one of the very few people on this planet who's been doing astrology longer than me, and that's Penny Thornton, the doyenne of Western astrology. She's been doing readings 50 years plus. I've only been doing them 45, 48. And I tip my hat to her. So me and her are doing a thing called Decoding the Divine, south of Bristol in the hills, south of Bristol in England, at the end of March, start of April. And that's over half sold out now, which is pretty good considering there's still 4 or 5 months to go. And there's various other things. Yes, I've got teaching courses online that's going to be online by January, and I'm doing all this Zoom talk and Zoom classes, and that's what I do every year, although I'm not doing that anymore because it's too labor intensive. And then the streaming and it doesn't stop. There's more and more and more. I've got so many books on the go, but the alternative is to retire.
Oh, who could do that?
What's the point of that? So as an astrologer, it's not an obligation, but it's a kind of duty to continue pushing it out into the world. And of course, at the end of the day, there's all the clients. I can never stop doing readings. It's my lifeblood. I don't the money's nice, but it's the empowering of individuals that kicks in as well, because they then go away and do it for others. That's what makes the difference. But as I'm sure you're aware, once you get to a certain level, you have to start building a waiting list. And I've got my waiting list down now from 2.5 years to just under 2. And I'm slowly eating away at it. But whether I'll ever get there or not, I don't know. And I'd have bitten your arm off 15, 20 years ago for this, because, you know, it's only in the last 5 years I've become successful. For 40 plus years, I struggled. I was in debt all the time. And people going, astrology, you don't believe in that old rubbish, do you? And now we're the soothsayers of the future, you know. I find it so ironic that people listen to us at this stage of history. Finally, people are taking astrology more seriously. Astrologos, the knowledge of the stars. And I'm thinking, well, where have you been?
Have you found that people, as acquaintances, just send you a message and say, what's going on? Like, I'm noticing people who never thought this way before are noticing that life has evolved to a certain point of it truly not fitting the rules we were brought up by, and assuming finally, like, oh, you can explain this, right? And I usually can, but I usually say, go read my forecast. Why are you asking me to send you a private text? No. But have you noticed that of the people around you?
I certainly have. And in contemporary culture, more and more you see, for example, it's now quite common to hear the phrase Mercury retrograde in comedians making jokes on stage. It must be Mercury retrograde. That's why this isn't working. And it's become part of the language. And, oh, yeah, well, he's like that because he's got a difficult Mars. You know, it's becoming more common now in contemporary culture. It's still not there yet, but it is happening. And as for people ringing up and going, well, what's going on? Why is it like this? I'm going, well, it's probably your chart. You know, go and find out about your chart. And the beautiful thing is that I'm training people to be astrologers so that they don't have to come to me. I can send them to other people who'll probably charge a lot less than me, who I've trained, and it takes some of the pressure off of me. And of course, as with everything, as I'm sure you'll be aware, it will all get to the point where we'll just about think, oh, I've cracked it now. Oh, heart attack, crash. We'll get to that point 1 or 2 minutes before we die where we think, cracked it. And then we'll leave. I know we're running out of time, but there is one last point I'd like to make.
Oh, please do. We've got
astrology gives you a really good perspective on mortality. You know, it helps you realize that mortality is just and only the end of the physical body. It's not about death. It's just a physical body wearing out. The Greeks called it psyche. They had specially trained priestesses who would cater to the body as the body died, and they would see that little wisp evaporate from the body, the psyche, the eternal soul, the everlasting eternal spirit. Death doesn't exist. It's just a transition of consciousness. And death doesn't scare me. The method of death might be a bit disconcerting. I'd rather not die in a hospital bed with pills and tubes. But hey, it is what it is. That's a perspective just unique to astrologers, I think, and probably a few Indian holy men.
I've read somewhere that Sidney Omar looked at the transits to his chart and cleared his calendar because he realized that was going to be his exit point. Now, that's a bit more specific than I think most people would get. But
I've worked out 6 potential exit points for myself. 2 have passed now. And I've kind of got it in my head that I'll have the choice over the next 3. And if I choose not to go, then the 6th one will get me. but that's not for another 15 years yet.
I
And
see
it
you
depends.
having too much fun.
I am, but as a Cancerian with Virgo rising, I do tend to worry about the world. And sometimes I do get depressed by the state of the world and the ignorance and the greed and the fear and the guilt. And I just think, what am I doing here? I didn't volunteer for this. And of course I did.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got the moon in Sagittarius. I bounce back. So I am glad I am the age I am, though. I'm not so sure I'd like to be my granddaughter's age at this time in history.
Yeah, I get that. I absolutely get that. But they're wired differently than we are. So
Totally.
totally. Well, would you tell people where they can find you? Your website, your YouTube channel?
Website will give you a contact for me. It's just a portal with a bit of information about my history and who I am and how to get hold of me. YouTube is Steve Judd Astrology, Instagram Steve Judd Astrology, email steve@stevejudd.co. I look at them all. I do answer everyone in time. Sometimes it takes a long time. And I'm not difficult to find. And I just want to encourage people to get into the noble art of astrology for self-discovery and self-development. And what better thing to do in the world?
Mm-hmm. Improve yourself. Yep. Yep. It's certainly, well, I thank you so much for the insights that you've given about all of this, but a way of looking at what is coming next year. So, and I look forward to watching what you post on YouTube and to talking to you again in 2026, I hope. Thank you very, very much for your time.
As long as we're both still here, I'll be here.
Oh, great. No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not getting off easily at all. That much I know.
You
Everyone, you
make it over to London, let me know, because I'm only just down the road from London.
I will. It's my favorite city on the planet. So, everyone, you can find me at empowermentunlimited.net. My YouTube channel is Professional Aquarian, and I've got lots of fun stuff on my Patreon, patreon.com/Kathy Beal. So everyone be well, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye. Thank you again, Steve.